Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works. And it is part 9. Part 9. This is really dragging on of our modern wrecker truck. And no, we are not at the clutter zone. We're in my main workshop, and my big workbench is actually fairly clean. And over here is a little side workbench where Natasha is working on her most recent project. It is a 34 Ford hot rod. And the reason that we are in the main workshop is this truck is getting a little bit big for the clutter zone. So, seeing as I've got to do the body work and things like that, and I'm going to be flipping it from side to side, as well as needing to cut some fairly large pieces of styrene, I've moved in here. So that's going to be our main focus this episode, is getting the main body work done. And I'm suspecting that there's going to be at least one more episode after this one, and it'll just basically be putting all the crusty bits on and putting some markings on the truck. But for now, we want to get this body finished up and on the truck. So since I want to be using the existing sides of the truck only, extending them, one of the problems I'm going to have is the body is going to be another 2 inches longer, which gives us space for probably another 2 doors on each side. What's going to happen is scribing the lines for the doors is not a problem, but matching all of these hinges and these really nice latch details, that's going to be a bit of a problem. So I'm going to grab the other side and I'm going to show you hopefully what the solution will be. I know this looks kind of gross, but what this is a latex rubber, and you'll be seeing more of this in an upcoming project. I'm already working with it on another project. But this will peel off, and then I'll be using some casting resin to basically make copies of these latches and the hinges, so that what I end up doing for the doors at the front of the wrecker is going to match what's already on here. So that is basically the plan for replicating these latches and the hinges. And I wasn't thinking at the time. I ended up covering 2 hinges and 2 latches, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute. I only really need to make a mold of 1 hinge and 1 latch, because I can crank out quite a number of copies. So I'm not quite sure why I covered so many of them up. So since the right side of the truck still has these goobers on it, and I still need to put another couple of coats of rubber on them, we're going to be starting with the driver's side. My first thought was to eliminate this radius that's at the front end of the body. You can see there. And I was thinking that would make it easier to join my body work up to it. However, if I put this on, what'll end up happening is I'll lose a lot of the strength at the front here, and I'm going to have to come up with new ways of mounting the front to the existing inner body. So I think I'm going to bite the bullet and leave it the way it is, even if that means that filling between the existing bodywork and my new bodywork is a little bit more difficult. I think that's the best way to go. I've cut a couple of 4thou pieces of evergreen styrene, one to use on each side, and I've already marked this one for the doors. And you can see what that's going to look like here. I don't know why this door isn't taller on each side. Seems to me a bit of a waste of space. And I almost made this one big door, and then I thought, wait a minute, the driver's got to open this up by the side of the road. He wouldn't want a really, really big, wide door. He needs narrow doors. So that's how I ended up with those 2 doors there. They're a little narrower than these ones, but it's all I can do with the available space. In order to make these doors, I'm going to be scribing into the plastic using this scriber. Now you can purchase these from bare metal foil, but this one is actually a surplus dental pick. So there's our first panel scribed. I've glued our two side panels in place here. Now I'm going to have to beef up the plastic on the sides at the top here, just because there's a radius in the existing body. I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom here, because otherwise it's not going to blend very well. We'll have to incorporate that radius into the top of the body here. So this will be the next piece we want to get in, and it'll help a little bit with the structural integrity, or lack thereof. So the front of the bodywork has been glued on here, and inadvertently I'd actually managed to incorporate a bit of a taper. It's a little narrower at the bottom than the top. Less than 1 millimeter, but at any rate, I'm going to have to put some filler in the corners here, but I do want to put a little bit of a curve in there anyway, so that's not going to be the end of the world. But you can see how much more rigid the whole thing is now. Next piece I'm going to put in is going to be this one in here, and then finally the two side ones there. And lastly will be the top. Then I'm going to have to do some serious filling in order to eliminate the seams. Alright, I've been busy. I've got front piece on here, and I've got the inside all boxed out, and I've started puttying the sides. And this top piece here, I actually cut this oversize, and I'm actually going to trim it now that it's in place, because I wanted a really good precise fit along there. So as I mentioned earlier, the devil is going to be in the filling of the seams, especially on the sides here, because we want this to look like it was all built all at one time, not a piece added onto it. So I've done an application of putty and given it a sanding here, and I want to have some idea of how close I am. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some lacquer primer sealer on it, some gray paint basically, and just see how close we are before I apply another coat of filler. So the bodywork is actually smoother than I thought it was going to be for this early on. Still a little bit of a dent running along here and here, and there's a couple of low spots on this side, but actually for this point it's looking better than I thought it would. So it's going to require a little bit more applications of putty and some sanding, and then we'll have to get into putting the hinges and the catches and stuff on. Well, I won't say I'm happy with the way this blends in, because I'll probably never be happy with it, but I have made a couple of applications of putty, and as well you can see that I used some gray primer just to make sure there were no obvious flaws. You can see the top here and the inner portion, which really didn't require much cleanup after putting that paint on. Now over here, let's get a focus on that. You can see I've put one hinge on already. Now if you remember those little blobs of snot I was talking about that were on the body there, they were used to create molds for making resin hinges and hopefully catches. So I'm in the process of casting these hinges, and I'll cover that in a future video on another project. But at least I'm starting with something that looks like the hinges that were already in the kit. This is what the hinges and the catches look like after I've popped them out of the molds. And you can see that there's there's quite a bit more resin than the actual part. And what I'll do is I'll trim all this away, and then I'll take the part and I'll sand it in order to thin it out as much as possible, hopefully to get it to close to the same thickness that the parts there that these details originally had. It's a little difficult with the catches because the bottom of the lower part there was actually the same as the surrounding area. So if I sand it too much, it'll go right through. But at any rate, that's what these parts look like before they get glued on. Alright, it took a couple of hours to cast these and sand them down and mount them, but we now have all of our hinges and our latches in place, and I basically followed the same rules that they did for the other doors, e.g. The latches were centered vertically along with the third hinge, and the top and bottom hinges were approximately 3 millimeters up and down from the tops of the doors. And that's the way it ended up turning out. And I've also boxed in the underside here. Not that we're going to be looking at it from underneath very often, but we did in fact paint and detail the underside of the truck. So at the very least we should carry through the boxes. I've got the body mounted temporarily, just so I can see that everything is fitting happily before I send it off to paint. One thing I have noticed is we seem to be a bit low at the front, so I'm going to be incorporating some shims into the mounting when I put it on permanently. But I'm crossing my fingers that it's going to look alright once it comes back from paint. Fresh from its visit to the paint booth, we have the body. And it doesn't look too bad. There's a little bit of roughness here. I'm going to give that a light sanding and then a polish. One thing I was anticipating, and unfortunately has come to pass, is Italeri's doors were scribed a lot deeper than mine. So what I think I'm going to try to do is I think I'm going to try to just put a black wash in these door frames here and see if I can tend to highlight them a little bit more. But hopefully it looks like my latches match the ones that came in the kit. Now, this hole here, which you're never going to see when it's on the model, was for basically a screw eye that went in there so I could hang it up in the spray booth. Now, one of the things I'm going to do in order to match the front of the truck is I'm going to be painting these fenders. I'm going to paint them the same green. And I'm probably just going to brush paint those, mainly because the thought of trying to mask this curve and everything like that doesn't seem like worth the effort for such small parts. We're getting there. So one of the problems I've got is how much more pronounced the existing doors are than the ones I've scribed in my edition. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run a pencil down my lines just to see if I can give them a little bit more definition. Okay, there we are after I've run the pencil down the panel lines. And it certainly makes them stand out a little bit better. And here's the other side. This is a little bit of rubbing compound that got stuck in the hatch. I'm not worried about that because each of these latch covers is going to be painted silver. But at any rate, at least the doors look to be very similar now. It's Saturday morning and I just got home from work and I've spent 20 minutes just finishing up assembling this video. I think we're close to the 14 or 15 minute mark and it's time to post it. So I achieved my goal for this week, which was basically to get the body extended and put together and painted. And I'm really hoping that we've got one more part to this. Because at this point, I'm thinking I've just got to put the crusty bits on, all of the chrome bits things like that. The only major assembly I have to construct is going to be a light bar right here. I've already got some ideas on what I'm going to do for that. Probably some light weathering. And as well as that, we need to think about markings. And I'm not going to make any promises because hopefully what I want to do is going to work out. It will probably be 2 weeks before the next part of our modern wrecker truck comes out. It takes me about 2 weeks to do a project video. I don't know what next week's video is going to be. Hopefully in 2 weeks' time we'll have a completed video of this if nothing goes wrong. And I'd like to thank everyone for watching and following this series. So until next time, keep on modeling.